Good afternoon, Dr. Binduji.
Namaste.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And Dr. Binduji's student. Good afternoon. Behind you. Yeah.
Gulshan.
Yeah. Gulshan. And David. Reda Kuzure.
Good afternoon again, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, those who are living across the world. And now today we are going to start a second session on the core concept of true nature of mind, emptiness, ontological reality, and the effects of their meditation on the psychology and physiology of the individual. So I request Professor Bindu Kutty to kindly lead the session. Thank you.
A very good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining for this course. It gives me great pleasure to welcome back Geshe to continue on the session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Binduji, Tinsumla, and Gulshan, David, and all the participants. This is our second session out of the 4. And when we speak about the emptiness, first, 2 questions to make sure that with the emptiness, unlike other subjects, this requires a great deal of rigor and intelligence. For that matter, that this understanding of emptiness, it is accurate, that it is not it does not fall into the extremes. Oftentimes, many people, and who are not really formally trained, but naturally gifted with intelligence, they tend to read Nagarjuna's books. And then they think that, okay, Nagarjuna is the idealistic, nihilist, saying that nothing exists. This is where people make mistakes. They see Nagarjuna's philosophy as falling into nihilism. And that is because of their failure to understand the nuanced understanding of the emptiness. So to make sure that one does not fall prey to the nihilistic interpretation of emptiness, we need to ask 2 questions. In fact, yesterday, Dr. Ravindra Nagendraji, the question that he asked about the self, where is the self? If the self is not there, then who is what is that agent which is thinking? So for that, we need to ask 2 questions. The first question is, do things exist, including the self? Do things exist? This is the first question. And if the answer is no, this is nihilism. This is not emptiness. Things are empty. The self is empty. If this is your answer, you fall into nihilism. This is not emptiness understanding. 1. Now, only if you're able to say by treating the worldly conventions as they are. For example, the COVID, we should take care of the COVID. We don't say that COVID does not exist. Why should we be afraid of? No, COVID does exist. And the vaccines for the COVID also exist. And so many lives lost to this COVID. So these are all the realities. We cannot deny the reality of the the functional conventional world. So for that, the first question, do things exist? Do things, including the self, exist? Answer, if you say it does not exist, they are empty, you fall into nihilism. This is not the real emptiness. Only if you can say that yes, things exist. How can it deny the existence of NIMHANS? How can it deny the existence of the NIMHANS, say the faculties? So these are the people. These are the people there who made sure that the Center for Consciousness Studies is effective. These people are there. So these people make sure that the Center for Consciousness Studies is undertaken or it is run smoothly. So everything is there. Only if you're able to say, yes, everything exists to the first question, then you are entitled to go for this second question. The second question is, if things exist, how do they exist? Second question is not about whether things exist, it's about how. What is the mode of existence of things? And here, if you say that things exist objectively as intrinsically, this is the absolutism, extreme of absolutism. So here, if you say no, things don't exist objectively, things are empty of objective existence. This is the real meaning of emptiness. When you say no to the second question, but yes to the first question, only then you are in the proper direction of emptiness. Okay, with this in mind, this is almost two questions. Let's not forget that. So with this in mind, what we said is that, okay, emptiness means empty of objective existence. The next question is, what does it mean by objective existence? And what does it mean by subjective existence? Subjective existence and objective existence, how do you demarcate between the two? And also that, how can you reject the objective existence? Yes, the self exists, but the self does not exist objectively. NIMHANS exists, but it does not exist objectively. Things exist, everything exists. COVID exists, COVID does not exist as objectively. So this is the point. With this in mind, first let me introduce the concept of this subjectivity and objectivity. And only after you get the clue that, okay, this is the meaning of objectivity, objective existence, and this is the meaning of subjective existence. Once you come to know that, then I will take you to the next step, how objective existence is to be rejected and how say the subjective existence is to be established. When you say that everything exists, they exist how? Subjectively, objectively, not objectively, empty of objective existence, but exists subjectively. Now for that, to succeed in this, normally what we do is that these classes require tremendous interaction. Without the interaction, then when it becomes the unilateral teaching or talk, then they say the listeners, the brain is not activated too much. So this discussion requires a lot of, say, the participation from the audience, and because of this, earlier what we said is that all others, they will deliberately focus on the participants from the faculties and the students from NIMHANS, and we will consider others as secondary, requesting them to put the camera off. So it doesn't matter now. So the point is that in this, just imagine that you are taking part in the interaction actively. And if that happens, then the tendency for you to understand this concept is going to be more. Otherwise, believe it or not, if you go to the big monastic universities, Sera, Depung, Ganden, and also in Tashilumbo, Rate, and then the Namduleng, so they're close by, the NIMHANS in Bangalore. And if you say that we study emptiness, 6 hours, Then they will laugh. They study for 16 years. 16 years into 360 days into minimum 10, 12 the hours. So this is the time that they dedicate. Usually what I do is that I make it very interactive so that people can get the most of this interaction. Okay, this time they try your best to be a part of it mentally, and this is how you will read the most. Okay, now what we are talking is we're talking about the subjectivity and objectivity. First, what you need to know is what is meant by, okay, you're not rejecting things. The self is not rejected. Nothing is rejected. Everything exists. Yes, everything exists. What are you rejecting? What emptiness are you talking about? Emptiness not of the object, emptiness of the mode of the object, mode of existence of the object. Things exist, the self exists, but they don't exist objectively. The next question is what does it mean by objective existence? So for that we need to know the two possibilities for something to exist, either objectively or subjectively. Okay, for this we need lots of examples, many examples, and I like to give you a few examples, and later on it is your responsibility to look for more examples if you really want to understand what emptiness is. And let's say the flower. Let's say the flower on in a loose sense. Let's say the flower in my left hand, and then in my right hand there's no flower. In my right hand it is empty. It's empty. There's no flower there. Now, if I ask you to imagine a bunch of blue flowers in my right hand and these real flowers in my left hand, if I ask you what is the difference between the two, what's the difference between the two, for sure what you will say is that one is real and the other is just the imaginary. Okay, what do you mean by real and imaginary? Just see if you can agree with me. The real meaning, something existing from object, and the imaginary meaning, something which your mind imagines. Your mind is the subject, that your subjective mind that imputes. Your subjective mind the imagines. So the imaginary flower, it comes into being through your subjective input from your mind. Whereas this flower in my left hand exists from the object. So this flower, in a loose sense, later on we'll come to learn that everything exists subjectively. Nothing exists objectively. So this is later on as an amateur, as a beginner into this. Let's say that in a loose sense, the flower that I have in my left hand, this is something real from the object. This we call as objective existence, as something which exists from the object, known as objective existence. And the imaginary flower, we see that no, it does not exist from the object. It's just how you imagine. Imagine means your mind imagines. Your mind is the subject as opposed to the object. So the blue flower that you're imagining, or the imaginary blue flower, they exist subjectively. Okay, this is how we understand what is objective and what is subjective. Okay, this is one example. The next example that I like to give you is that let's say dream. You fall asleep, and then you start to create a dream. And of course, NIMHANS, the Center for Consciousness Studies, I'm sure you've been doing some research on dreams, REM sleep, non-REM sleep, and so forth. And so let's say that your mind creates a dream. And by the way, how does the mind create the dream? This is a very interesting phenomenon. And I'm not going to go into detail of this, how the mind creates the dream. What's the process like? What's the process like? This is a very interesting phenomena. And in fact, it is not that everybody can easily identify that. It's it's more like experiential. Only some people can see through all this process one by one. How you fall asleep, from there the next step, then next step, and gradually protrusions arise. First the screen, then the protrusion, then it becomes like a full-fledged image, and then they start to talk to you, and then you interact, and then the dream takes you over. So all these processes are there, very interesting. And okay, keeping that aside, let's say the dream, you create the dream, but when you see the, let's say that a dream tiger jumping, coming to chase you, you run, you react to it. In the dream, you see the dream tiger as real, as objectively there. When you wake up, your fear dissolves, knowing that the dream tiger was coming from your subject, from your mind. It was not really there from the object. So when you wake up, you realize that the dream tiger was empty of objective existence, and you realize that it was just subjective reality. The moment you realize that the dream tiger is subjective reality, your fear pertaining to the dream tiger dissolves. The moment you believe that dream tiger is objectively real, your fear arises. This is how the Buddha taught this concept of emptiness to tackle our emotions, to tackle our stress, anxiety, anguish, bewilderment, depression. And all these stressful or all these undesirable emotions, to control them, the Buddha taught the concept of emptiness. And so therefore, this research that Dr. Bindu Kutty is heading on behalf of Center for Consciousness Studies on the wisdom of emptiness. So that is going to be a breakthrough research, because this is what the Buddha taught ultimately to quell our mental disturbance, agitation, all the ill health of the mind, mental ill health, mental, say, the imbalances. This wisdom of emptiness has the ultimate answer. So with this in mind, once you know a little bit about what is subjective, what is objective, what is subjective, what is objective, yes, the flower can exist objectively or subjectively. Say the real flower, we say that it exists objectively. The imaginary flower, we say it exists subjectively. Now, once you know that there are two possibilities for anything to exist, either subjective or objective. And if you if you establish the subjectivity, then automatically you reject the objectivity. So that is known as the emptiness of objective existence. So in other words, in future, should anybody ask you, what does it mean by emptiness? You can confidently say it is the emptiness of objective existence of anything. Emptiness of objective existence of the flower, emptiness of objective existence of your mind, emptiness of objective existence of the self, emptiness of objective existence of everything. Okay, then once you understand, yes, okay, yes, there are two things. Say, even in a loose sense, in the vernacular sense, we speak about the flower existing objectively, imaginary flower existing subjectively. When you're able to make this decision, then the next question is, how will you evaluate if something exists objectively or not? This next question. How do you evaluate that something exists objectively or subjective? Do we have to just believe in it, or there is a process, there is a system, a valid system which can help you to evaluate whether or not something exists objectively? Okay, for this, I will take you to the slide, the screen sharing. After this, Timala. Oh, okay. The title, we have it, The Analytical Meditation on Emptiness. How do you meditate on emptiness? Of course, this part all these what you do now, they form the part of the meditative emptiness. And on the last session, I like to give a very simple way of meditating on emptiness. Okay, now let's see. The point that we're discussing is, if there are two possibilities for something to exist objectively or subjectively, how can we evaluate? For example, I remember Dr. Ravindraji once during his talk here, presentation here in Tibet House, he was talking about the phantom limbs. Phantom limbs, which means that the patient has the feeling that I have the limbs there. So the limbs amputated, your limb is amputated, and then otherwise your fingertips where you have itch happening, and then this is exactly what the person feels. And there's no limb there, but you feel that there's a limb there. So this is the limb that the person's feeling, the limb that person, the phantom limb, the person feels is purely subjective. There's no limb there. Purely subjective. It's not objectively there. Whereas for us who do have the limbs or arms, this, in the vernacular sense, we see that this is a real limb and the other one is a phantom limb. So this distinction. Now, how do we evaluate? So this person thinks that, okay, my arms are intact. How do we evaluate? You have to look at it. You have to look at it, and then they say, you see that although you felt all these feelings, sensations, itch and so forth, but when you look at it, you see that it is amputated. So what I earlier experienced as a limb, that was the phantom limb, is not a real limb. It's subjective. It's a purely subjective. I'll say the subjective reality is not objective. Likewise, how do we evaluate that things like flower, things like self, things like NIMHANS, things like the COVID, and so forth? How do we evaluate that they exist subjectively or objectively? This is a question. This is a very serious question, and this was brought up by Arya Nagarjuna, 1st century great Buddhist scholar, logician, practitioner, and he's being cited by almost, I would say, many of the Western philosophers, Indian philosophers. He was like a brilliant philosopher, logician, and the enlightened being. So what he said is that he said these two lines: if the mirage were to be water, say you see me, so you are 1 kilometer away from me, and you see that I'm in water, and you're wondering whether what you're seeing, what you are seeing, that Dorji is in water, is that real water or that is a mirage? How do you evaluate this? How do you evaluate this? What you see as a water, is that real, or this is just subjectively imputed by your mind? If mirage means it's not real water, is what your mind imputes, or your subjective mind imputes the mirage to be real, as real water. How do you evaluate that? What you are seeing is a real water or as a mirage? How do you evaluate that? And all the people with sense, they will say that we have to go closer towards you. By going closer towards me, if the place where I am now, it is purely dry, totally dry, then you will conclude that what you earlier saw as a water was not real. It was deceptive. It was a mirage. So he's Arya Nagarjuna. He summarized this concept in 2 lines. If the mirage were to be water, why not those close to the mirage see water? Or why not those close by the mirage see water? Okay, now the point is that, okay, that makes sense. If the mirage does exist as water, water means from the object, you should be able to see a water there. So how do we evaluate that? You have to go closer to this object. Going closer to the object, you see that there's nothing wet there, there's nothing water there. It was truly dry. Then what you conclude? Earlier what you saw as water was deceptive. It was just mirage. So what you earlier says water was coming from your subject, not from the object. So from there's mirage was seen, this water was seen as subjectively real, not as objectively real. This is a very simple, very powerful, yet simple, say the design by Aranagarjuna, how to evaluate whether or not something exists objectively. Now, taking this as the example, how do we go about doing this now? This next question. Okay, with this in mind, let's go to the next slide. Okay, next. Okay, next. Good. Good. Okay, what I have here is we're talking about the subjectivity. Subjectivity. We talk about the yesterday. We also indicated the 5 levels of emptiness. 5 levels of emptiness. Okay, if you can take us back from yesterday's slide. Conscious. Okay, good. 5 levels of emptiness. So these 5 levels, the first one is emptiness of permanent, unitary, and independent entity, emptiness of autonomous substantial reality, emptiness of external reality, or emptiness of externality or external reality, then emptiness of true existence while not rejecting objective existence, and then finally emptiness of objective / inherent / intrinsic existence. Here, from the number 1 through to number 5, number 1, which is the emptiness at the top, emptiness of permanent, unitary, independent entity. Number 1 through number 5, we see that it is put in this order in ways that it progressively becomes subtler. From number 1 through number 5, it progressively becomes subtler, meaning that the first one is the grossest, and the last one, the lowest one, is the subtlest. And what we are trying to study here, because we don't have time, what I'll try to do is I'll try to do a little bit of comparison between number 3 and the number 5. Number 3, number 5. Okay, with this in mind, let's go to the last slide. Yes. So all these 5 levels of emptiness, to understand that, we are talking about the subjectivity. Subjectivity meaning comes from the subject. For example, let's say that the dream, is it subjective or is it objective? All of you will say this is subjective. And let's say that mirage, is it subjective or objective? You will say subjective. So likewise, if I say rainbow is a subjective, objective, and most of us will agree that it's subjective, while some may argue that it is objective. But most of us will say subjective, because as we go closer towards the place from where the rainbow appears, we don't find any rainbow there. And rainbow effect, in fact, this is effect of the scattering of the light by the water droplets serving as the prism. So with this, what we have is that subjectivity, and in fact, the Buddhism, likewise in many of the Hindu philosophical traditions, and then Western philosophical traditions, and now quantum mechanics, and also neuroscientists, to a great extent, they also talk about the subjectivity. In fact, for information, particularly the faculties and the students of NIMHANS, what I would say is that 2019, the beginning of 2019, I was in Israel for a conference organized by the 2 neuroscientists, one who was very renowned neuroscientist and very renowned in Europe, and he and 2 of his the students and the many others also took part in the conference, and I was also there. There was on this the consciousness. What is consciousness? And there was another very senior neuroscientist. He's also from, I think, from Israel. And there was the teaching, the conference site, the conference hall, and the hotel in which we were all put up. So from there, they have the bus to take us from the hotel to the conference hall. And one of the very senior neuroscientists, he was sitting next to me. And he said, I'm very impressed by his brilliance. He was very intelligent. And he said, yeah, we come to know each other. And he said that I'm interested to know how to manage your emotions. He told me how to manage your emotions. And of course, that is all about particularly neuroscience today in terms of the clinical neuroscience, how you apply the study of neuroscience in managing the emotions like stress or the psychosis or say depression, anxiety, and so forth. How do you manage these? And the pains, also the pains. How do you manage on the basis of the study of neuroscience? And he told me how to manage it. And then I was talking about, just talking about, say, our emotions that are triggered by the cognitive thought process within us. And cognitively speaking, say, what we see, they don't really represent the reality. Then what he said, he's a very refined neuroscientist. What he said was that I agree with you that what I see is not reality. What I see is not reality. These are just the expressions or the experiences that we get of the firing of the neurons in your brain. And this gives you the different experiences. That's it. There's nothing really there as what I'm seeing. These are just the expressions of the firings of the neurons in your brain. And I fully agree with you. This is what he said. I fully agree with you that what I'm seeing is not reality. And he said one thing which is very interesting. He said that, but although I know what I see is outside, as external, it's not real. It's just the outcome of the outcome in the form of experiences sparked by the neural firings. But still my emotions are very strong. How to manage this? This is what he said. Okay. So what I'm saying is that how the emotions, finally, the study of neuroscience, the one is to discover the workings of the neurons, and on the other hand, to apply this knowledge to the clinical area. Clinically, how to apply this knowledge to the patients. So, with this in mind, going back, the subjectivity, and where this neuroscientists, the senior neuroscientist, he said that yes, everything's subjective, even from the point of view of the neuroscience. There are so many areas, like the Buddhist tradition, all these different traditions within Buddhism, they speak about subjectivity. There's nothing that the objectivity is undermined. The subjectivity is being explained. And then many of the Hindu classical philosophical traditions, they also talk about the subjectivity. And then the Western philosophy, the Spinoza and the Bertrand Russell and Plato, Aristotle, they all speak about subjectivity. And now, as I said earlier, if neuroscience also talk about subjectivity. And now, interestingly, quantum mechanics is also talking about subjectivity. Okay, now the point is that, do they all mean the same? Do they all point to the same subtlety of subjectivity? This is a question. So with this in mind, the Tibet House, we organize lots of programs on the subjectivity, particularly quantum mechanics, how the quantum mechanics present the subjectivity, and how the Buddhist philosophy presents the subjectivity. And this is what we organize, the conferences that we organize quite often. And Yeah. So the point is that let's see. So here I'm going to bring two very popular understanding of the subjectivity in the Buddhist tradition. Two very popular, and in both cases, don't believe. Don't just follow by believing that, oh, this must be true because this is said by the great saint, the Buddha. No, don't believe. Just evaluate. Just evaluate if that makes sense to you. If it also makes sense, you don't have to believe, and never start with believing. Never start with believing. In fact, this was what, this is so important, particularly doing the the collaborative studies between the modern science, physics, quantum physics, neuroscience, with any classical contemplative traditions. If the blind faith is involved, if the mere belief is involved, then the collaborative studies is defeated. The purpose defeated. It should not be involved with any kind of blind faith. So even the subjectivity, which I'm going to share with you, the two important, very famous, the understanding of the subjectivity, which I'm going to share with you. Don't just believe in these two. Learn and see if that makes sense to you. If it doesn't make sense, don't believe. Okay, this point. And in this connection, I also like to share these small anecdotes. That was in Cambridge, when I was in Cambridge, 2003, when I was in Cambridge there as a fellow. There was a brilliant physicist, and I don't want to go in length. And in the course of a discussion, then he said that today only physics is education. This is what he said. Only physics is education. And I said, why? And he said, because only physics allows you to have a critical thinking. All others are imitation of the earlier teachers. Let me repeat it. Only physics is education, because only physics allows you to have critical thinking. All others are imitation of the earlier teachers. Okay. So what I said, imitation meaning blind faith. The earlier teacher said something and you just follow blindly. That's it. He said it. And then I told him, okay, at least you gave the reason. Listen what the Buddha has to say. And I cited the Buddha, that what the Buddha said, bhikshus and wise people, the wise people, just as the goldsmith tests the purity of the gold by cutting, burning, and rubbing the gold, you should also examine my words and put them into practice, not because you respect me. So this is what the Buddha discouraged blind faith. The moment the blind faith is involved, there's no room for collaborative studies with the modern science. This is, what we need to keep in mind. So with this in mind, how do we evaluate if something exists as objectively or something exists as subjectively? This question. So with this in mind, the slide show, we're talking about the two kinds. Of course, there are many versions of subjectivity, and I threw this question to you, whether or not all these subjectivity presented by the different traditions merge to the same understanding. Answer is, of course not. Even within Buddhism, there are at least like 5 levels of understanding the subjectivity, and I'm going to bring forth only 2 of them here and see how different they are. And don't follow blindly, just follow with the rationality, with the rational lens of mind. Okay, with this mind, let's say one understanding of subjectivity is presented by one particular Buddhist philosophy known as mind-only school, Chittamatra school. So what is said is that there's nothing really there as external. The first one, nothing really exists as external, but they exist as just the nature of one's own mind. Nature of one's own mind. Okay. If this is the case, then it's very similar to, it's very similar to the perspective of the neuroscience, perspective of quantum mechanics. No, this is very naive conclusion to say that it's very similar to neuroscience, very similar to quantum mechanics. It's very naive conclusion. For this, I like to give so first, they reject any degree of externality. There's nothing really that's external. What we see as external, they're all deception. They're all deception. They are just like the reflection in the mirror on your own mind. Your mind is like the mirror on which all these reflections happen, and we misconceive these reflections as external objective reality. In reality, it is just your subjective mind. Everything is the nature of your subjective mind. This is one subjectivity. And then the next one, the third one. The third one, at first, number one, then we go to number 3, and then we go to number 2. Third one, the subjectivity. It is same that the subject, the object, and a subject. Not only the object is subjective, even the subject is also subjective. Even the subject also doesn't exist objectively. So, the emptiness of objective existence. And yet, this school, which is the highest Buddhist school, presents the functionality world as it is. At the same time, rejecting any degree of subjectivity. Nothing exists, well, any degree of objectivity, sorry. Rejecting any degree of objectivity. Nothing exists objectively, be it the object or be it the subject. Even your mind does not exist objectively. It does exist, but it does not exist objectively. Okay. I'm sure that still you are a little confused that these two are very similar. Okay, now here comes the distinction. For example, the first one, as presented by Chittamatra school or the Minority school, that everything is subjective in ways that it rejects externality. So look, subjectivity as opposed to externality. What is external is deceptive. What is seen as external, they are all the reflections of your own subjective mind. So this is one level of this subjectivity. So here what happens is that it is like the mirror and the reflection in the mirror. Oftentimes, many people bang against the mirror. Many people, they bang against the mirror thinking that there's a space behind this. There's no space there. It's just a reflection. You confuse the reflection for a real space. You see the reflection as real. Because of which you try to go beyond this and you bang against it. So that in reality, the person will after banging against the mirror, then you realize that it was the reflection. It's not the reality. It's just the what I saw as the real space there. It was my subjective imputation. I thought that it's objectively real and is deceptive. Okay, so the mirror and the reflection in the mirror. Now the last one, emptiness of objective existence. Emptiness as opposed to objectivity. The first one is emptiness as opposed to externality. This distinction we have to make. The first one is emptiness as opposed to or subjectivity as opposed to externality. And the third one is subjectivity as opposed to objectivity. This distinction we have to make. Now, for the third, I like to give the example of watching a movie in a movie theater. Watching a movie in a movie theater. Let's say that you are, say where I am is a screen. If you watch a movie in a movie theater, proper huge movie theater, with the classical, the old school, the projecting system, projecting the movie shown by the projector. So you are watching a movie where I am is the screen, and where you are is the audience, and then the movie comes from where? The movie comes from the projector. Where's the projector? The projector is behind you. projector is behind you. Now the projector is like your mind. Projector is like your mind, and you are the one who's viewing, and the movie is projected on the screen. The screen is before you, and the projector is behind you, and the screen resembles the object. The movie resembles the object on the screen, and the projector resembles your mind, the subject. So actually, the small children, when they watch the movie, they see the movie so real. If it is a ghost movie, the small children, they are so scared. They're so scared, thinking that this real ghost there. Whereas the elders will not be scared, knowing that this movie is not coming from the screen. It's coming from the projector behind you. But projector and the screen, is there a space gap? Answer is yes. There's a space gap. Whereas in the mirror, with the mirror and the reflection, is there a space gap between the mirror and the reflection? There is no space gap. Because there is no space gap, it is known as the subjectivity to reject the externality. External meaning your subject, and the external, there's a space gap. So where there's no space gap and you explain this subjectivity, this is known as the subjectivity as opposed to externality. Whereas the third one is subjectivity as opposed to objectivity. We do find the space gap between the projector and the screen. But all what is happening on the screen, the movie, is all coming from the projector, nothing from the screen. So it's purely subjective from the projector, which is the subject. Whatever is happening on the movie is purely coming from the subject, but there's a space gap between the movie and the projector. So that is known as the subjectivity as opposed to objectivity. Because from the object, from the screen, there's nothing there as a movie. It's all coming from purely from the subject. Yet, what is projected and the projector, there's a space gap. This is known as externality. They accept externality, but they don't accept objectivity. So from the object, there's nothing, there's a movie. It's all coming from the subject. So this is number 3, which means the first one, the object is the same. The image is there, but the image is not as external to the mirror. Whatever you are seeing, they are not external to the mind, to the subject mind. But that object does exist as real, as object real. Whereas yet they explain the subjectivity. Whereas the third one, there's nothing objective. It's all coming purely by the power of the subject. It's a pure subjectivity. This is number 3. Now, on the number 2. Number 2 says 50-50. 50 from the object, 50 from the subject. Okay, I don't want to elaborate too much on this because I want to spend more time on how to evaluate that what we are seeing is subjective, what we are seeing is empty of objectivity. How to evaluate that? Not following blindly, but following with rational thinking. Okay, so with this, the next slide. Okay, good. Now we're going to the core of our study, the 4 essentials to establish emptiness of objective existence. Now, say let's say that this is before I go through this is the most important part. Before I go through this, I'd like to just give you some scenarios, and then you must involve yourself in this. You must take part in this mentally. Let's say that in the first place, let's say that there is let's say that let's say that you have a very pleasant dream where say you're dreaming of let's say you're dreaming as a student of NIMHANS, and then Dr. Binduji is in your dream. Dr. Binduji tells you that, okay, Will how about how about we all go to the Delhi to receive the, what is that, the Bharat Ratna the award. Wow, this is the greatest of the award in India. This is the greatest of the award for NIMHANS. Not only NIMHANS, each one of you. Wow, that is the just more than a dream. This is so precious. Yes, you're all very excited. Then we all go in the dream. Dr. Binduji is meeting us, and you're so happy that wow, we have, each one of us, we're going to get a Bharat Ratna. Okay, then the President, Honorable President Govindji is going to present this Bharat Ratna to each one of us. And then in the process of you going there, so there's tremendous excitement there. And somebody tells you, in the group, somebody tells you that, Dr. Binduji and each one of you, why are you so excited? Any time the COVID can, arrest you and you can lose your life, what will you do with the Bharat Ratna, right? Somebody may say that, oh, that's also true. Then excitement subsides. Impermanence. When you think about the impermanence, anicca, impermanence, then the excitement subsides. Okay. Then somebody says, okay, so with this, on one hand, there's a tremendous excitement there. Then number two, but think about impermanence, your excitement subsides. Then number three, you think about, let's say, you think about the people who are suffering in Afghanistan under Taliban. People who are suffering there, you think about these things, and you come to know that your brother or your sister happened to be there. They're in the hands of the Taliban. Then the moment you heard this, the moment you hear this news, then you forget about Bharat Ratna for yourself, right? Again, the excitement subsides. And then the next moment, you wake up. You wake up. Bharat Ratna was dream. You meditating on impermanence of dream. That your sister is in the hands of the Taliban is also dream. And what do you feel? You feel so relieved. You feel so relieved. Okay, so let's see that all these 4 episodes, getting Bharat Ratna in the dream, then the thing about impermanence, COVID impermanence, then meaning you're coming coming to know that your sister is in the hands of the Taliban, the bad people. All these dreams, there's one thing in common, if you can identify what that is. That, be it pleasant dream of getting Bharat Ratna, or the very unpleasant dream of your knowing that your sister is in the hands of the Taliban, all these things, one thing is common, that is that these are all dream. Number one, these are all dream, where you believe the dream, which is actually subjective reality, as objectively real. When you see the subject, what is subjective real as objective real, then all these emotional stirs happen. Say the excitement over getting Bharat Ratna, and tension, depression, anxiety to hear that your sister in the hands of the Taliban. So all this anxiety, so these are all related to the cognitive thought process. The moment you wake up, your fear that my sister is in the hands of the Taliban's hands, that fear dissolves instantly. Why? There's a transition in your cognitive thought process from the cognitive thought process, thinking that my sister is in the hands of the Taliban, to the shift, that is that it is my dream, it's not real. The moment the cognitive thought process changes from one state of the cognitive thought process to the other, your emotional states instantly changes. So with this, what we come to learn is that thinking about impermanence, it helps you to quell your, say, the excitement. But to wake up, it is very powerful. That is the most powerful way to bring about a change in the cognitive thought process, which will instantly bring about, say, the transformation in your affective state of mind. in your emotions. So if this can be applied, if somebody can really get a glimpse of this, then instantly your emotional the balance will be the retained, or instantly it will be a retreat. Okay, so going back now. So these are the 4 points that we need to, if possible, try to have on our fingertips, known as how to see that objectively everything's like a dream. Objective, nothing's there. Like dream, everything is subjective. How do you know that? This is known as the 4 essentials to establish emptiness of objective reality. Objectively, there's empty. Everything exists subjectively. How to establish this? Establish this with the help of what is known as the 4 essentials. Okay, and and in fact, there are many ways by which to deduce the emptiness of objectivity. But these 4, if you know these 4 will be like the foundation. The foundation for us to understand emptiness, and this you can relate to many other, almost like all the other ways to establish emptiness. Okay, the first one is known as, it'll take a little time today and also tomorrow. It'll take a little time, and then day after tomorrow, if we finish this part, there are many other parts to share with you. And then I'm also thinking of doing a little bit of what we call as the meditation on emptiness, where you can very easily meditate on it and then see the transformation in your emotional states. Okay, the first one is known as the essential of identifying the object of negation. The number 2, essential of understanding the emptiness of the objects being one with its parts. 3, essential of understanding the emptiness of objects being different. Okay, sorry, there's a typo there. Different from its parts. And then finally, the essential of understanding the pervasion that anything which is empty of being one with or different from its parts entails the emptiness of objective existence of the object. And conclusion, emptiness of objectivity of the object is the objectivity of the object. Okay, this is conclusion. And now I'm going to go through each one of them, point by point. And the first one is extremely important, essential for identifying the object of negation. When you say that, let's say, the nothing exists objectively. Nothing exists objectively. Nothing means you are negating something. You are negating something. Say, if you say that, I don't have money, you are negating the possession of money. You say that, I don't have COVID. Nowadays, wherever you go, you should prove that you don't have COVID. Either through the certificate, the vaccine certificate, and so for that, no, I don't have COVID. When you say I don't have COVID, I'm empty of having COVID. This means you negate having COVID. Now, essential for identifying the object of negation. When you say I don't have COVID, do you know what COVID is? To say that I don't have COVID, to negate the presence of COVID, you have to identify what COVID is. If you don't know what a COVID is, how can you say that that I don't have COVID? For example, if I say that, okay, I don't have, let's say that I don't have zamling in my pocket. I don't have zamling in my pocket. Those who do not speak Tibetan, you will be, what are you saying? Okay, zamling must be very small that can fit in your in his pocket. Zamling means planet Earth. So if you don't know what zamling is, you cannot say he's right or he's wrong. So to say that what you said is wrong, you have to know what zamling is. Zamling means planet Earth. So when I say that I don't have the zamling or I don't have planet Earth in my pocket, you will say that, yes, you are right. If I say I have zamling in my pocket, then you will say you are wrong because zamling is so huge that it cannot fit in your pocket. So for that, you have to identify what you are negating. When you say I don't have, you have to identify what you're negating, something in this context. Likewise, when I say that there's no objective existence, you have to identify what the objective existence is. Objective existence is. So objective existence is negated. You have to identify that. Before you negate it, you have to identify what it is. What is meant by objective existence. This is so important. Because that we cannot have this interaction. Usually for this class, to make it very effective, there must be interaction happening. Without interaction, then you have to spend more time in this. With interaction, it's going to be very quick for you to grab or to get this understanding. Okay, objective existence. When we look at let's say that when you look at this flower, or you can pick up anything on a table and you look at it, do you see this as a movie projected by the movie projector, or you see this it has nothing to do with the projection by the mind? It is there objectively. It is independent. It is there as the object independent of my mind. If you see this as the object, as a flower, as independent of my mind, of your mind, this is meaning of objective existence. So what you negate is objective existence. You don't negate the flower. You negate the objective existence of the flower. Objective existence negated. What does it mean, objective existence? To negate it, you have to know what exactly is objective existence. Objective existence means an existence which exists independently of your mind. Independent of your mind. Okay, this is how you identify the objective negation. And when you identify that, you must identify it very precisely. Very precisely. And if you say that, oh, there's a thief there, oh, there's a thief, we must stop the thief from entering NIMHANS. We must stop the thief entering NIMHANS. Then, okay, what's the thief like? Oh, the thief has 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth, the body, and this is the thief. Then what you identified is this is known as okay, the over negation. This is known as over negation. And if you say that, oh, what is the thief? What is the thief like? The thief is the one with the 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth, the whole body, the mind, with the clothes on. Then when the president of India comes to NIMHANS, you will stop him also. Because he also has 2 eyes, 1 nose, the whole body, which means what you identify as objective negation is you imagine it overly. So that is, you reject. This is like a over rejection. You reject more than what is to be rejected. So if you say that, oh, the thief is a boy. Girls can also be a thief in actuality. The thief is a boy. Then all the girls who are the good girls, bad girls, the thieves, they all enter. Because if she's a girl, you can enter. We are stopping the thief, and you think that the thief means a boy. This is, say, the limitation of the rejection, limitation of identified object negation. Okay. So in other words, the first one is the problem of the maximalist redundancy. The first one, maximalist redundancy. You over negate. This is a problem. For example, like say, if you say that, oh, when you speak of emptiness, the self is empty, self doesn't exist. No, self exists. If you say the self doesn't exist, this is the maximalist redundancy. Maximalist redundancy. You reject more than what is rejected. Self is not rejected. If you reject the self, you fall under the extreme of maximalist redundancy. Whereas if you say that, oh, the thief is just, the thief is a boy, then you will let go of the girl thieves. That is minimalist inadequacy. Minimalist inadequacy. So if you fall into these two problems while you are trying to identify the object negation, if you fall under these two problems, maximalist redundancy or minimalist inadequacy, then you will never get emptiness. This is the problem. So therefore, for this matter, the earlier I asked the two questions. The two questions, number one is, do things exist? If you say no, you fall under the category of minimalist. Okay, the no means you fall in a category of the maximalist redundancy. You fail to identify the object negation well. Then you negate what is not to be negated. Whereas if you say no, if you say yes, things do exist, then second question, do they exist objectively? If you say yes, then you fall into the extreme of minimalist inadequacy. So your answer should be no to the second and a yes to the first. Things do exist, but they don't exist objectively. Things are empty of objective existence. Okay, if you're able to know this so well, this qualifies you to the understanding of the first essential, which is the essential of identifying the object negation. Okay, so with this, so what are we rejecting when you say emptiness? Something is empty. You are negating something. What is that thing that you are negating? The flowers negated? No. Objective flowers negated, or the objectivity of the flowers negated. In other words, objective existence of the flower is negated, not the flower. Flower is not negated. The person is not negated. The objective existence of the person is negated. The person is not negated. Okay, this is what we should be able to follow. Okay, next. Okay, with this, the second essential says the essential of understanding the emptiness of objects being one with its parts. Okay, the essential understanding of emptiness of objects being one with its parts. Now if this, let's say this flower, initially we can do something like simple things like flower, and later on you can gradually switch this to the self. You can switch this to your parents, children, husband, wife, teachers, students, and so forth. You can extend this to others. First, let's do with this simple object, the flower. Once you know this, then your job is to extend this to others. Okay. So what we see, when you look at this flower, we see the object of negation is that the flower to be existing independently of a mind. Flower to be existing independently of a mind. That is the object of negation. That is to be negated. That the flower seen as objectively real, as independent of my mind, of my subject. The flower exists independent of my subject. That is to be negated. How are we going to negate it? Okay, this question. Let's say that you, from distance, you see me in water. What we said earlier, from 1 kilometer away, you see me in water. And your friend says that, oh, Dorji is in water. And you said, no, he's not in water. And he says, no, look at this. That's water. And you said, no, this is not water. How are you going to prove that Dorji is not in water? You will take the person closer towards where I am sitting. And coming closer, if you're able to show that it's so dry here, you can tell the other person what you earlier saw as water was not objectively as water, it was purely subjective mirage. Okay, likewise, if the flower does exist as independent from the object, if the movie does exist as independent from the screen, not from the projector, then you go towards the screen, you should be able to find it. Likewise, if this flower does exist objectively, nothing to do with your mind, then you have to go towards the object to look for this. This is what is so important. Now, going towards the object, there are two possibilities. Going towards the object, there are two possibilities. For example, let's say that if somebody tells me that you have taken my Rolex watch, you have taken my Rolex watch, it is in your hand right now. How many hands I have? I have only two hands. Then I open my first hand, is empty. I open my second hand, is empty. This concludes that the claim, the blame the other person is putting on me, that I've stolen his Rolex watch, which is in my hand right now, that is proven to be wrong. It was purely his own thought. It is own subjective thought. It is not objectively real. So there are only two possibilities. If it does exist in my hand, there are only two hands. These are only two possibilities. I open the first hand, it's not there. I open the second hand, it's not there. Which means that conclusion that we can draw is that what the earlier person's belief that the Rolex watch, his Rolex watch, is in my hand, it is disproven. It is proven wrong. Okay, now there are only two possibilities for the flower to exist objectively. What are the two possibilities? Okay, so for that, we have to go closer to this object. How do we go closer to this object? This question. How do we go closer to this object? So we interact with the flower with your eyes, with the eye consciousness, with your eyes. Now, your eyes are so gross with the physics, from the point of view of the neuroscience, from the point of view of the physics. Your eyes are very gross. Your eyes are so limited to not to see many of the things what is really there on the flower. Now, if you, instead of your eyes, if you use a more refined the subject, like the electron microscope, if you use electron microscope to look at the flower, then you will really see the flower very closely. Okay, so our job is to see the flower very closely towards the object, because what is to be rejected is the flower existing objectively from the object. That is to be rejected. Now we have to go closer to the object to see that if the flower actually exists objectively. Going closer to the object with the help of the electron microscope, what we see is that initially, what we see the flower, look at this flower. This flower, look at the texture, it's so beautiful. Color combination is so beautiful. But when you look at through electron microscope, it is not like this, the way and the manner which we are seeing it. So how do we see that with the electron microscope? First, we see the flower, and keep fine-tuning this electron microscope. Fine-tuning the electron microscope. What we see is that you see what we earlier saw as extremely the smooth texture. We see the roughness there, see the rough surface, and gradually you see the cracks, like the cracks on the dry mud. The cracks. What are these cracks? They're actually not the real cracks. These are the cell partitions, cell membranes. Through further fine-tuning in the electron microscope, you see that the cells, individual cells, and then the nucleus at the center, and the cytoplasm, the nucleus floating in the cytoplasm with the cell membrane protecting the cytoplasm and the nucleus. Then the nucleus, inside the nucleus, you further fine-tune the electron microscope, the nucleus, within the nucleus, you will see the chromosomes. And then through further fine-tuning the electron microscope, even the chromosomes, we see that they are made of the DNA molecules. And the DNA molecules, we see that they are made of atoms. In other words, on that atomic level, where's the flower? The flower's empty. Okay, now, what we do is that, don't forget this, look at this flower to see first essential identify object negation to see the flower as objectively real. So whether or not the flower actually exists as objectively real. This is the first. How do you negate the objective existence of the flower? So for that, we have to go closer to the object. Let's not forget these points which I am sharing with you very systematically. Say, how to evaluate if the flower actually exists as objectively or as subjectively. How do we evaluate that? This question. So for that, we have to, the manner in which R.A. Nagarjuna said, we go closer to the object to evaluate if it does exist objectively. How do we go closer to the object? With the help of our eyes or with the help of the electron microscope. Better with the electron microscope. What our eyes could see is extremely gross, but the electron microscope see is much closer to the object. So with the use electron microscope, we see the same object, which with the naked eye is seen as flower. We see it at different phases. The first as cracks, second as the separate cells, then the nucleus, then the chromosomes, DNA molecule, and the atoms, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, so forth, the atoms. Okay, so now stay there on the atomic level. Stay there on the atomic level. Now my question to you is, earlier you saw the flower as objectively real, has nothing to do with your mind, nothing to do with your subject, as objectively real. Now we have come too close to the object. Where is this flower? There are two options, like the two hands. Two options. One is, what I'm seeing is just full of atoms. Full of atoms. If I'm not wrong, so for example, if somebody weighs 75 kg, then the person has 75 into 10 to the raise of power, 10 to the raise of power 27 atoms in the body. So likewise, we see that what we, with the naked eyes, what we see as a flower is nothing but a pool of atoms. Okay, which of the atoms is the flower? None of the atom is the flower. This is number one. Number two, if the atoms are not the flower, but you said that the flower exists objectively, then keeping aside what is not the flower, remove all the atoms, do you find a flower as different from the atoms? If you remove the atoms, nothing is left there. It is not different from the atoms also. So these are the only two possibilities. If the flower does exist objectively, these are the only two possibilities. Either it should exist as to be identified with the atoms, or to be identified as something different from the atoms. And both are proven as wrong. Atoms, none of, if you say the atoms of the flower, none of the atoms is beautiful, while the flower is so beautiful. And the atoms of the flower and the atoms of the rocks, stones, and the trees, there's no difference. And particularly on the level of the electrons, protons, neutrons, there's no difference at all. The protons which constitute the flower, and the protons which constitute the cyanide, protons which constitute the COVID, they're the same. There's no difference. So the point is that nowhere on the level of the subatomic level, the subatomic particles, nowhere you find to be identified as a flower there amongst the particles. Nor can we identify the flower as different from these parts, so from these the sub-elementary particles. So these are only two possibilities to say that if a flower does exist objectively, these are two possibilities. When these two possibilities are ruled out to be the flower, then what is left there is a flower from the object. From the object, there's nothing to be seen as a flower. Okay, so this is a very quick overview of over how we take these steps. These are the 4 steps. Now the actual 4 steps we will do tomorrow. Okay, the actual these steps. So I request all the participants not to forget all these points which I indicated to you in a very systematic way. Try to recollect, and in fact, the recording is available. You can avail these recordings, and if before the 1st December. Okay, the 1st December is the third session, and before that, if you can revisit this, that will make our next class very easy. Okay, so I'll stop here to entertain some questions. If you have questions, please, either you can write it on the chat box, or you can ask it directly with your virtual hands up. Okay, by the way, before we go through the questions, I like to share with you one point which Dr. Bindu yesterday she sent me a WhatsApp message saying that what difference do we find in terms of the physiological say the reactions of the body pertaining to the different experiences of the 5 levels of emptiness. This is a very serious question. What I would say is that, okay, I'm being very transparent, is that one, from our side, the whole purpose for this is to manage our emotion. We are not really interested to see, what is the perspiration level, what is the palpitation level, what is the flow of the stress hormone, and so forth. We are more into the emotions, how these experiences, they have effect on our emotional world. And now I would say that so those who want to conduct this research, and let's say that, of course, we can help to give suggestions and so forth. But since the neuroscientists, you have the tools, and of course, in the future, after 50 years, after 100 years, the tools will improve. As of now, whatever tools that you have, as I said earlier, some indications I indicated in the first session. Let's say that, like even your heartbeat. Of course, they say you get a glimpse of emptiness, your heartbeat slows down. Of course. And then they say, how would you measure these experiences, like the tickling sensation on a body or the cold wave flowing through a body? How do you measure these? And then they say the various, another possibility would be to look at the flow of the happy hormones like oxytocin, the endorphin, and the dopamine, and so forth, or serotonin. So how do you identify which of the chemical flows during which of the experience? And of course, these are 4 or 5 happy hormones. People identified them, each one of them, with a very specific, say, the emotional states is there. You can just see if you have the facility to look at these area, and the perspiration also, and then the let's say the blood pressure, the heartbeat, and what the Buddha very clearly indicated is that with the experience of the compassion, particularly with the experience of compassion and so forth, the Buddha indicated that these will cleanse your blood. So you can see what I mean by cleansing the blood. And then because of this, even the glow on your body will take place. So how would you explain this, say the glow, where the person is so depressed, stressed, the glow disappears. When a person is very happy, particularly very compassionate, the glow, some very unique glow comes with. So that the Buddha attributed to the blood. The blood is cleansed. So what is really happening? The blood platelets, they increase, RBC increase, or WBC increase, decrease. What is really happening? When you see that somebody is very healthy, what do you mean by that? Pertaining to the blood. So these are things that, and then, from your side, I said today in the world, the globalized world, what are the instruments? What are the kinds of the tests available. Body temperature is one thing, then the perspiration, the stress level, and then all these, the physiological changes the individual can go through. How do we measure these? So these, yes, and particularly as I said earlier in the first session, that if you get a glimpse of what emptiness is, then on that basis, you can have all these facets, what I'm sharing with you, all these facets, then you will be the best person to say, okay, in this connection, this is very different from the mindfulness meditation. From the meditation, emptiness is different from the mindfulness meditation. In terms of this, we can take this as the index, or this as we can take this test to see how the two differ. Same mindfulness meditation, then the meta-awareness meditation, compassion meditation, then the wisdom in emptiness meditation, and so forth. Same what are the differences that you find, and what tests to be employed to see to the differences, and so forth. Okay, this is pertaining to the question. And then the 5 levels. Yes, if we get time, we also have to go through these 5 levels, not 5. We can go through the last 3 more in detail if we get time. Okay, this is what I'd like to share with you. More questions? Okay, yes. Gulshan?
So, during the sleep, when we dream, and in the dream, that what we are seeing actually, we are considering it as an objective during the day.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you hear now?
Yes.
Okay. So during the dreams, the things we are perceiving, we consider it as an objective. It is flower, building, or something else. So we consider it as a subjective. As soon as we realize that, okay, it's, that we are aware of that this is not that thing, but we come to know that this is a subjective is happening there. So this is a phenomenon we call it as sometimes lucid dreaming. That okay, when we are aware of that which are there, what is the reality behind that? Objective or subjective? So that we consider as lucid dreaming. But with yesterday talk, you mentioned that during the wake time, our mind is grounded during the as we go towards sleep, then unconsciousness, that subtlety of mind increases there. So during the sleep, our mind is more subtle than that of the wake state, and at the same time, we are more clear during the wake state that what is objective and what is subjective, but we are not aware during the sleep. Is there any relation between the subtlety of mind, know the objectivity and subjectivity of the objects during the wake as well as during the sleep?
Okay. I think better than myself trying to summarize what Gulshan asked. Dr. Binduji, would you mind summarizing the question? Because your voice breaks.
See, what he said is the mind is gross during wake.
Yes.
Yeah, and the mind is subtle during sleep.
Yes.
So these distinctions matter when I think about the subjectivity of emptiness, or testing the emptiness as what is that, as not objective reality. So that is,
Okay.
that is what
Okay. Let me Let me see if I got you correctly. That the mind of the waking state is grosser. The mind of the sleep state is subtler. And then in the sleep, you tend to see the dream as real. When you wake up, you see the dream as subjective. It's not objective. So is it that when the mind is grosser, you are able to be aware of the subjective objective, versus in the dream where the mind is subtler, you could not see the distinction easily. Is this your question? Very good question. Thank you. This is a brilliant question. Okay, now the question is that the waking state, the mind is very gross, and the sleep state, the mind is very subtle. And this distinction, that is subjective, objective, no objective is subjective, this is all happening easily in the waking state, not in the dream state. In the dream state, even the dream is seen as real. So is it that as the mind becomes subtler, you tend to, be less likely to see the emptiness of objectivity, whereas in when the mind is very gross, when you are fully woken up in a waking state, you are able to say that the dream is subjective, it's not objective. So you are able to talk about objectivity when the mind is very gross. Okay, is there any correlation between these two? This is a brilliant question. Thank you so much. Okay, now the point is that this is extremely important. And the gross mind and the subtle mind. Generally speaking, one difference I indicated it in the first session, the gross mind is more intertwined with the physical body, including the brain. Is very closely connected with the physical brain and the body. Whereas a subtler mind, as the mind becomes subtler, it becomes more and more independent of the physical body, including the brain. Let's not forget it. There's one distinction. Now, going back to Gulshan's actual question is that, yes, for ordinary people like us, what Gulshan said is very true. As the mind is grosser, there you are able to distinguish, oh, this is COVID, I'm not having COVID, okay, the dream is not real, it is subjective. And as you go into the mind becomes subtle, like the dream, then you even cannot see the dream as dream. You see dream as real. As object real, you cannot distinguish the subjectivity and the objectivity. So the point for us, that's very true. For us, we are only trained in the gross mind. We are not trained in the subtle mind. So the subtle mind can deceive us very easily. Whereas the gross mind, we are more trained in this. Now the practitioners, what they do is that they deliberately try to activate the subtle mind while they are still in the waking state. You're getting it? Say, I'm not sleeping. Not sleeping. While not sleeping, you activate this subtle state of the mind. Subtle state of the mind doesn't only mean dream. Dream is one of them. There are many subtle, even there are subtler states than the dream mind, subtler states of the mind. And the practitioners, they deliberately try to activate the subtler mind while you are still in a waking state. Then they train this. They train by using this. They think about emptiness by using this subtle mind. When that is done, when that is successful, then when they go to sleep, when they start to have the subtle mind of the sleep, then they're able to make this distinction. Okay, this is sleep, this is not real, this is subjective real, it's empty of objective reality. So therefore, the trained people, highly evolved, highly trained people, for them, just as they are very active to distinguish the subjectivity or objectivity in the waking state, they're able to do the same thing in the subtle state of the mind, including the dream. And because of which, there are many practitioners who take the dream as a great opportunity, sleep as a great opportunity. Because the benefit is that in the sleep, your mind is more independent of the brain, more independent of the physical body. Because of this, you employ it, you can easily make use of this. For example, say if there is if there is a staff, if there's a staff who is the part-time worker in NIMHANS, then I can use this person more easily than somebody who is full-fledged worker in full-fledged staff in NIMHANS, because with the partially connected part-time worker there, so the person has more, the person can take leave more easily. Whereas if you're a full-time worker there, to take leave is very difficult. Likewise, when the mind is less connected with the physical body, including the brain, particularly as the mind becomes subtler, then to employ this is much easier if you're trained. So for the trained people, they take this dream, sleep as a great opportunity to practice the spiritual realizations. Okay, we'll send your questions. Very good, thank you. Okay, more questions?
Maria? I would like to read out Maria's questions.
Yes.
Maria, can you ask?
Yes, ma'am, I'll do. Hello. So my question is, like how intelligence may determine certain cognitive abilities or capabilities. Are there any determinants for an individual to attain or develop the wisdom of emptiness? That is one. Second question is, what is the role of modern psychotherapy in developing the state of emptiness? Thank you.
The second one is role of modern psychotherapy. Okay.
In developing state of emptiness.
Okay, the first one is like intelligence determines the like intelligence determines cognitive capabilities. What are the determinants of the developing wisdom of emptiness? What is the role of modern psychotherapy in developing state of emptiness? Okay, so for this, for example, let's say, what is the best way to, what is the emptiness? It has nothing to do with, spiritual awakening. No, don't take it like this. Emptiness, this emptiness, take it like a quantum mechanics, or the neuroscience, very subtle neuroscience. Take it like this. Don't take it like an exotic experience where you touch the forehead and then emptiness experience, or a guru blesses you and then experience emptiness. No, these will never happen like this. This is purely a rational insight. Is a rational, say the analytical experience. So for that matter, you have to study. For example, quantum mechanics. You have to study it for years and years. You have to do experiments. You have to do the calculations. You have to do the experiments. So it is only through this that you can think of becoming an expert in quantum mechanics. Likewise, it is emptiness. So I did mention to you that the emptiness and quantum mechanics, the experiment, what is that? The conclusion of the subjectivity in quantum mechanics, they don't exclusively call it a subjectivity. They call it as the observer. Independent observer, observed makes no sense. So in the context of emptiness, independent of the subject as observer, nothing exists as observed as the object, empty of object reality. So there is a great parallel there. Just a quantum mechanics, somebody to really reach to that level of understanding, you have to study. You have to study, reflect, and reflect more. So this is exactly how the emptiness, the experience of emptiness should come about. So it is only through the improvising your intelligence through more studies and more reflection that emptiness experience can be activated. The second one. Oh, what are the what is the role of modern psychotherapy in developing the state of, okay, so basically, as I said earlier, let's say that modern psychotherapy has no ways by which to increase your compassion. There's no. They will, unlike, say for example, they will counsel you. They'll counsel you to say that be more compassionate. Don't fight with people. Don't fight with your husband, wife, and this, and be more compassionate. Do a little bit of breathing. They will give you advice. And the university and the professors, they give you advice. Okay, E equals MC squared. This is like advising you to say that don't see E equals MC cube. It is MC squared. So this is the advice given, and you follow it. So the counseling is like a lecture. It is nothing like, this like supernatural power. No. So this is purely the study, and some if the patient is extremely smart, then the counselor must be extremely smart. If the counselor is not smart, the patient can easily see, your drawbacks, and then they will, your counseling has no value at all. So the counselor, likewise, if the student is very smart, the teacher must be equally smart. So for the emptiness, this is like this. It is only through a study, intellectual reflection, that you can get the experience of emptiness. It has nothing to do with the psychotherapies.
Namaste. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Ramiji.
Just one question.
Ramji, yes.
Yeah, on a lighter note, what about rural people who are illiterate in formal education? Do they need quantum mechanics to practice emptiness?
Okay, this is a good question. In fact, I would say that in fact, it is like, in fact, it should be the other way around, right? Quantum mechanics, what should the ordinary people do? Without quantum mechanics, you cannot meditate on emptiness, right? You have they say the same thing. We can't expect ordinary people to do research on neuroscience. We can't expect that. These are very sophisticated things, very sophisticated. For the common people, yes, there are ways and means to quell your, balance your emotions. But of course, if you really want to, be like the brilliant people, then you have to improve your intelligence. And keep in mind that common people are common people. They will remain as common people if they don't improve their intelligence. They have to improve everyone can improve the intelligence. There's no one to be identified as this is common people, this is intelligent people. No, even the common people, they can become intelligent people, provided you don't think that I'm common people. If you think that I'm common people, you will never put effort to improve yourself. Everybody can improve. For example, say the two children of the same intelligence, if one goes to school, one always goes after the cow all the time, or goes after the cattle all the time. Then after 10 years, after 20 years, the child who goes to school, NIMHANS, the child will become the ruler of your village, the head of your village. And where the other person who goes after cattle all the time will always remain with the cattle, will not improve, while the basic intelligence is the same. So therefore, everybody has the capacity to grow the intelligence. And yes, keep in mind that Nobel Prize is not for everybody. Right? If you want to get a Nobel Prize in physics, right? Or the common people, they have to get a Nobel Prize in physics, they should know the quantum mechanics. Of course. If you don't learn quantum mechanics, you cannot get the Nobel Prize in physics. Impossible. Yeah. So likewise, say even if you have no experience of quantum mechanics, but if you put effort, everyone has the capacity to understand emptiness, and therefore everyone has the capacity to keep the emotional balance. Okay, Ramji.
Thank you.
Thank you. More questions? Okay, Janvi.
Geshe, I wanted to know that, like the way you gave the example of the flower and you can, see emptiness through it. How do you use emptiness to your mind, whatever is going on in your mind? How do you use emptiness to see the emptiness of it?
Okay. So this is again a very good question. This is very interesting. If you get time, yes, on the last day, we will do a quick exercise, on the meditation on the emptiness of the mind. We'll do that. Yes, on the last day. Thank you. Okay, any from the NIMHANS?
Can you, very nice. Thank you so much, Geshe, for elaborating upon emptiness in this class, in this course. So when you talk about emptiness, we learned that the mind is so powerful, and the meditation is making us our mind become more and more powerful. So it is contrast, emptiness and powerful. Mind
Okay.
is powerful.
This is very good question. Okay, first of all, before I say it's very good question, I should double check that I got your question correctly. Okay, the question that, if I may try to paraphrase, is that on the one hand, we talk about the emptiness meditation. Mind is meditating on emptiness. On the other hand, we need our mind to be very powerful. So how do you correlate between the two? How do you compromise? Or it's not really a compromise, it's like to negotiate. Or how do you explain this? On the one hand, meditate on emptiness of the mind, meditate on emptiness. And on the other hand, they say that we are trying to make our mind very powerful. Is this your question?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. This is a very practical question. Okay. It is like, first let me give you a very quick example, and then let me go back to your main question. Let me see, if the person is so restless, oh, I have to do neuroscience, the research, after I will do I'll spend 10 hours a day. Oh, I have to do shopping. I have to take care of my child. Oh, my husband is having a litigation case. I have to go there. You have so many things to do, right? And in the end, you cannot do anything. So then the person comes to Dr. Binduji. Dr. Binduji, what should I do? I want to do all these things. And Dr. Binduji says, don't do anything. Stop, rest, keep your mind calm. Focus on one thing. No, I want to do everything. If you really want to do everything, stop everything, right? Stop everything. Your mind digression will stop. All your distractions will stop. When the distractions stop, then your mind will be channelized. Your mind will be channelized. Only when your mind is channelized, then you can go forward. Likewise, the thing is that our mind, believe it or not, just as our heart, 24 hours, our heart is busy. Likewise, our brain is also busy 24 hours. It's active in the daytime. Another part of the brain is more active. In the sleep time, some other part of the brain is more active. So, in other words, the brain is constantly working. Likewise, our mind. In other words, our mind has a set of energy. That energy is distributed here, there. And then the power is lost. You cannot do anything. The mind does not have the power to do anything very effectively because the power is lost. Now you have to channelize the power of your mind. Channelize the power of your mind. For this, what we do is that we just cut the expenses of our energy, mental energy, on all the unnecessary things. All the unnecessary things. For example, like say, why my neighbor doesn't have the COVID? Why only our family has the COVID? This is totally unnecessary. You know, all these unnecessary garbage thinkings are within our mind. They consume a lot of energy. It is like the mobile background, what is that? Apps are running. Background apps are running and they are consuming lots of batteries. So the power is lost. You don't have the power. Now with the emptiness meditation, all these unnecessary thoughts will be stopped. Stopped, you see that they're all garbage. Once you stop that, then the energy is concentrated, is channelized, and then the mind becomes very powerful. So this emptiness meditation is extremely powerful. So with this emptiness, then what happens is you see the other side. Emptiness, there are two sides. One is emptiness, and the other side is dependent origination. Then by seeing that with the emptiness experience, all these unnecessary mental thoughts, they will be stopped. Then seeing dependent origination, then all these useful, wholesome cognitive thought processes, they become so powerful because unnecessary waste of the energy, they are cut by the wisdom of emptiness. Thank you, Dr. Binduji.
It is very nice. I mean, you have very nicely explained it. And
Thank
that
you.
one side emptiness, the other side dependent origination.
Yes.
Never thought about it.
Thank you. Okay, more questions? If not, we'll stop here.
We will stop here and
Yes.
further we
La.
will.
Huh? Okay, there's one question from the YouTube. Hmm.
There's one question from YouTube from Mr. Karma Karuna. He asked that Venerable Geshe, in 4 essentials, what is the significance of the third point? Is it not enough to mention the second point only in 4 essentials?
So the question says, of the 4 essentials, show the 4 essentials.
Yeah.
Okay, screen sharing. Yes. Yes. The 4 essentials. It says that what is the benefit of the third essential? Bringing number 1, 2, 3, put them together is done by number 4. So number four is very important, but don't worry too much about this part. This is what we're going to do on the 1st of December. We are here to complete this. I just explained it roughly, and now we have to go into this one by one in the actual intellectual inquiry form. That will do. But for your information, whoever asked this question, the point is that point number 1 is the object identification, the identify object negation. Then number 2 and number 3, these two are very important. Then number 4 is like bringing 1, 2, 3 together. Number 4 makes these 3 together. Then the conclusion. After this, then finally, what is your conclusion? Conclusion is that nothing is objectively there. It's all purely subjective. This is the conclusion. Please don't worry. That we'll do at the next time. Okay, next question.
There's another question from Mr. Kapil Dev. how to remove the impressions on mind which has been there since childhood.
Okay. How can one remove the impressions which are there within one's mind, which you have since your childhood?
Okay. If the questions pertain to your trauma,
Impressions of the trauma, how to remove them?
or impressions in general, so most likely,
I would speculate that the person's asking about the traumatic experiences, impressions of the traumatic experiences of the childhood. How can we erase them? Okay, if that is the case, then I would say that the one would, of course, there are many ways of doing it. For example, let's say that, if I'm too attached, if I'm too attached to my mobile, for me, let's say that this mobile is everything. I don't have a house. I don't have anything. I don't have car. I don't have anything. I don't have no bank deposit. This is only the treasure that I have. Then anybody touches it, even that will scare me. And then if somebody or just let it fall on the ground, it really create a scratch in my mind, and the impression I carry, my mobile, this impression I carry all the way. Then one day, let's say my brother, my sister, they said that, Dorji, you don't have a house. Don't worry, we'll give you a mansion, a big mansion. You don't have a car. I'll give you the worst Mercedes Benz. And what do you want? Oh, mobile. What mobile? The what? The 10 years old mobile. Don't worry, I'll give you the iPhone 13, right? iPhone 13. Okay, then the moment I get all these things, then the impression that I had, I carry of the trauma of my mobiles, which is 10 years old or 15 years old mobile. Somebody dropped it, right? Then the impression that I carry, it automatically gone because it's so insignificant as compared to all the big things that I got today. So this one way of erasing the past impressions which you get from your childhood, number one. Now, the thing is that, but it's not that everybody's going to get all these big things in your life. So big things, these are all just metaphors. Your mind should become big. Your mind should become think of the world, to think of your future. Think of more meaningful purposes. Your mind should become big. Then what you experienced in the past can be minimized or can be mitigated or can be erased. Then the emptiness meditation, or let's say the impermanence meditation. Seeing that, say that, okay, you have some traumatic experience in the past, when you during childhood, and now you carry this impression now. It's very traumatic. So let's say that, okay, at least say that there's one book by a great enlightened the psychologist by the name Bodhisattva Shantideva. He's a brilliant psychologist. His book, A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. There, he taught us the psychology, how to erase the past traumatic experiences, impressions, by cognitively, by developing your cognitive abilities to think big and to think more profound, to think more broadly, that the incidents of the past becomes very small. For example, let's say one example given is that if somebody, okay, this is a real, it's not just example, it's a real thing that happened. One of my friends, he had the AC machine, air conditioner, and he did not find use of this, so he wanted to sell this. And his friend came and told him that, oh, you want to sell this? I'll help to sell this. And then what he did is that they asked, they settled on like 20,000 rupees, and he took it. He took it along with the AC, air conditioner. The person disappeared. Person never showed up. And my poor friend, he did not even know where the person is. Forget about the AC. And the wife was really worried. What happened to our AC? He's such a fraud. He has deceived us. And the husband said, wow, I'm so happy. And the wife said, why? You should be worrying. And the husband said, I'm so happy. I'm not carrying any impression from the loss of this AC. And the wife said, why? Because okay, so he said that if we are so lucky that he did not take our house. If he took our house, then it is terrible. So at least he's very honest. He took the AC air conditioner, and telling us that I'm a fraud person. So we knew that before he took away our house. If he sell this AC and gave us the money, and then we'll give the house for him to sell it, then he'll take it away, then we'll be left desperate. So we're so lucky that he took only our AC, not the house. So instead of carrying the impression of the sadness and being traumatized, you feel so happy that I'm lucky in the state that I've not lost my house. So if if something bad happens, there are many more bad things can potentially happen. You should be feeling so lucky that these worst things that happen to the people in Afghanistan recently, they are not happening. They did not really happen to me when I was young. I'm very fortunate. This is how we can think to cognitively make yourself rich to get rid of the past impressions. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Binduji, Dr. Ravindraji, Gulshan, David, and all of you. And see you again.
See you on
Yeah.
first.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, you.